All right. My name's Dustin, and today I'm going to be tying a brown woolly bugger pattern that I really like to use. Pretty much my go-to fly for pretty much any situation, whether I'm fishing on a river for steelhead or other stream trout or fishing lakes, that kind of thing. So just a pattern that I kind of came up with. Kind of a lot of steps to get it where it is, and this one really seems to work. It's got a brown chickaboo tail, which I'll talk about a little bit, and then grizzly brown, and then you got copper flash dubbing underneath, and then I've ribbed it with a brown crystal hackle that gets real translucent in the water and really has a lot of movement, and really seems to let the copper just kind of glow through. So and I do this one bead head. I like most of my patterns weighted, so I'll get to tying it. Alright, so I'm going to be using it's actually a Cabela's brand, and that's it's actually a dry fly hook. I like finer wire hooks. I also don't like my streamer hooks with an extremely long shank, but so that's the hook I'm using. And then also I'm using I'll put this on first, but Spirit River. This is a 5/32 copper bead. So, and when you put on a copper bead, you want to make sure that you put there's a small and a big hole, for those of you who don't know, and you want to put the small hole onto the hook first. Alright, throw that in the vise. Okay, and then I also like to weight it even more, so I got 0.015 lead wire, and I like to put that in a bobbin. It just makes it go on either easier, and I do about 15 wraps. And then I go ahead and cut that off. The lead wire doesn't seem to do too much to the scissors, so I usually just use my good pair for that. Haven't had any problems yet. Dulling that up. Alright. So next thing I'll do is I'll just kind of lash that down. I go over it really loose, a few turns. You can butt that up against the bead there. Cut off my excess. Put that away. Now I'll come through. I like to build up a little bit behind the first wraps of the lead wire there, so that holds it in place so it won't slide back, and now I can go in loose at first. I put a coating down, and then I really lash down the lead wire, and then just run my thread to the back. And then I usually stop just kind of before it hits the barb of the hook there. Alright, and by the way, what I'm using for thread is just a UTC 140, and that's the rusty brown color. Next thing I'll tie in is the grizzly chickaboo, and this is just a hairline dubbin ink mini marabou. It's actually I believe actually comes from a chicken as opposed to a turkey. It's a lot smaller of a marabou feather, so I end up using whole feathers that look like this at first. They just seem to have a really nice amount of webbiness going up the whole fiber. So sometimes it's hard to find good turkey marabou for stuff like that. They can get kind of wiry towards the end. So and then basically I'll take and I'll put four feathers together. Just kind of line the tips up the best you can. Then I take and put that on, and what you're looking for is about the length of the hook for the tail. I don't like them too long, but if you get them too short, they just don't have the same movement in the water. So just take a few good wraps just to hold it in place basically. And then what I'm going to end up doing is cutting that off about where the lead wire ended. I'm actually going to take a few more wraps here. Sometimes this stuff can get away from you once you cut it, so it's just easier to wrap it up while it still's got the quill on. Alright, now I'll snip it off of there. Alright, if any fibers want to pull away now, you can just get them out of there. Otherwise, this kind of helps build up the body, because you got that lead wire on, so then you don't end up with some areas that you got to build up with thread or anything like that. I pretty much end up with a nice tube for a body here. So, all right. Next thing I'll do is put on my crystal hackle, and that's hairline dubbing as well. Really like this stuff. This is the medium size, and this is a brown, and it's just basically like a kind of like a synthetic hackle where it only has the fibers coming out the one side. So I just tie that in by the tip there. You can run it up too if you want. Unnecessary, but I do it sometimes. So there we go. You can just pull that to the back, keep it out of the way. Alright. This is probably the most time-consuming part of the fly coming up here. It just so happens, I guess this fly is pretty much tied with all hairline dubbing stuff. But this is ice dub copper. When it came, it was the individual fibers were a little bit long, so I ended up cutting it a little bit. It's kind of a messy fiber. It gets everywhere as I'm putting it on, but like I said, it really provides a good amount of flash in the water when paired with this this crystal hackle that I'll rib on next. So this stuff will go on pretty loose. A lot of it's going to fall off as you're putting it on, and you really gotta put some friction on there to get it to grab onto your tying thread. And even as I wrap, you'll see probably a lot of this coming on, but you don't really have to worry about that too much, because you're going to be lashing it all down with your crystal hackle as a rib. So just kind of build that up. I don't usually build incredibly thick bodies on my woolly buggers. Gonna need just a little bit more to finish off this fly. When I was originally working with this copper dub for the first time, I would do a dubbing loop, but I don't know, it was even messier. I ended up with more of a pile on my tying table than anything after I was done. So just catching some of those fibers. And I think I'm just going to put on just a touch more here. Okay. All right. So this next part, you don't have to have a rotary vise by any means, but it can definitely help things out a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll just put on a half hitch really quick. Keeps your thread in place. And you can put it on your bobbin holder there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap this crystal hackle forward. And you can play around with how close you do the wraps. Basically, I like them fairly close. I don't like to have too much flash showing through. I just feel like too much flash and it kind of has a tendency to spook the fish. I kind of like it to glow from underneath this stuff. I just kind of careful. You can probably do this quicker than what I am, but I like to really make sure that I kind of have a consistent space between the layers and make sure that I'm not catching any of my hackle fibers as I wrap forward. With this stuff, it doesn't seem like you have to stroke it back really. The fibers are pretty easy to work with on there. And don't worry if you have some of those long strands of copper. That really only just seems to add to the fly pattern. And after you fish it a bit, some of them start to come out anyways. And I don't know, if I've kind of noticed that it seems like once I fish this pattern for a while, it almost seems to fish better. I'd like to think it's because some of that copper comes out into the hackle fibers. And I know with a lot of patterns like this, guys will end up they'll go back in with a piece of Velcro or anything and pull out the dubbing anyways before they even fish it. So just something that you can do if you want. I typically don't. Alright, so we're pretty much done with this fly. Just gonna lash it down here a little bit in front and then pull out my finish tool here. Just do a couple wraps. So you don't need many, just 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. Down. Put your thread. And then I really like this Loon Outdoors here, water-based. It has a really nice fine applicator tip. It doesn't seem to well, it doesn't thicken up. Obviously, it's in this nice sealed bottle, like a lot of the solvent-based head cements. So just put a little bit, let it soak in, and that's pretty much the fly. Like I said, pretty much my go-to fly. It has a really buggy look. Marabou tail, because of the webbiness in these chickaboo fibers, has just a ton of movement. The crystal hackle has a ton of movement, and I think you'll really like the way this looks the first time you see it in the water, just the way that copper glows through. So hope you enjoyed this tie, and tight lines, guys.